So again, everyone, good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. Next slide, please. This webinar titled Program Implementation and Evaluation. This is session 2 on implementation. And this webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, and we're housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kati, and I'm the project coordinator of the center, and I'll be introducing our webinar speaker for today. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health workforce to deliver evidence-based and promising practices to individuals with mental health conditions. We also address the full continuum of services spanning mental illness prevention, treatment, and recovery supports. And we also provide training to related workforces such as police, first responders, primary care providers, vocational service personnel, to provide effective services to people with mental health conditions. We also utilize supplemental funding to support school teachers and staff to address student mental health. Next slide, please. We also offer training programs on evidence-based practices for serious mental health conditions, wellness and recovery for providers and people with mental health conditions, school mental health, comprehensive multi-tiered services and support, Hispanic and Latinx mental health education, online education courses such as Wellness Matters, IMR, and Functional Thinking, and more. Next slide, please. And as a reminder, all of our training programs, products, and services are available to you at no cost. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products that the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, we ask that you please sign up to receive our email communications. And you may do so by hovering over our QR code that you see on your screen, and it'll take you automatically to our email listserv registration page. Slide, please. We also want to let you know that following this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. So the surveys are important because our continued funding is linked to them. So we thank you in advance for your participation. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. Next slide, please. At the time of this presentation, Marian Delphin Rittman served as Acting Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS, SAMHSA, for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during this webinar by using the chat feature. We ask that you please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I'll collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During this webinar, our presenter may also pose questions to you, so please feel free to participate. The MHTTC network is committed to using affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all its activities, events, and products. And as a reminder, we also want to share the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, mental health, substance use and crisis, emotional distress, or if you are concerned about someone in crisis. Now I will turn it over to our webinar presenter for today, Sean Karazak.
Thanks, Kati. Appreciate it. So my name is Sean Karazak. I'm Assistant Research Coordinator at Rutgers University. I work on several research projects and implementation projects in the department, also help some of the community mental health programs around or in New Jersey that have some of the SAMHSA grants also. So I see some returning names, so I'm glad to see some people returning back to us. I'm wondering if there's anyone that missed last week and this is their first session, just even with the raise of hands, something in the chat box. So I see someone raise their hands, and welcome to our session. So I'm going to do a quick review in just a minute, so I'll be able to catch you up onto what we covered last week. But for anyone that's new, I was just, I asked last week if there's any topics or areas that people hope that I talked about, or anything they were hoping to get out of these sessions. So just interested to hear if there's anything in particular for anyone new that they're hoping for me to cover. So I can focus on that if we get to it. Okay, so I'm gonna get started, and if things come up, let me know as we go along. Just you can write in the chat or unmute your mic and ask whatever questions you guys have. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick recap of what we covered last week. So for new people, just give an idea of what we covered, and just a quick review of what we did last week for people that are returning. So we talked about building a planning team, and we talked about identifying who needs to be part of the process of our planning team. So we discussed including agency leadership, direct staff, and counselors, including some counselors, maybe being creative, including other stakeholders, right? If we're doing a school plan or a school project, including some maybe administrators, things like that. And overall, just building a team that kind of complements each other, right? So if you guys have strengths in one area and weaknesses in another on your team, trying to add some people that might be able to complement one another. We talked about assessing program readiness, so understanding the strengths and weaknesses of our program. So we discussed the importance of selecting a location for a program, not only for housing the program and being able to deliver it, but also for clients to be able to access. Then we also talked about making sure that clients can get to our program or we can get to them. We talked about assessing the needs of the program in the community, right? Is it a good fit for what our clients need? We discussed a little bit about addressing how to get funding and use our funding. And also we talked about staffing the program. So whether that was new or existing staff, how to kind of get them in there and implementing any new trainings that maybe our staff needed for that. And then we discussed thinking about our outcomes and what we want to get to. And we talked about how our outcomes kind of help with our planning stage, but not only that, but also our implementing stage we'll be talking about today, and then the evaluating stage, which we'll be talking about next week. And it really helps nail down the data that we should be looking at and clarifying what outcomes we want to get to. And we talked a little bit about our data collection plan, matching our data collection with outcomes. And I remember last week we had some people talk about they were research focused. So I'm going to talk a little bit about research data today and a little bit of research design, just to give a little information on that. So hopefully that will be helpful also. And then we also shared, kind of at the end, I shared some of those planning guides. So there's many different implementation evaluation frameworks, and I kind of shared some of the guides that go along with those. So I'm just wondering if anyone looked at them or thought that those were helpful, or maybe were able to kind of use them and take some notes and think about their program. Or if anyone has any questions kind of lingering from last week that came up during the week. So again, feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute your mic, you can feel free to do that also. See questions in the chat. And also, as you guys remember last week, thumbs up and smiley faces or sad faces are helpful for me also, just to kind of know where everyone is. Okay, so I'm just gonna start moving along here. So today's agenda is the implementation stage. And like I just said, I want to cover a little bit about different types of data and some research design, because I think maybe that would be helpful for some people talking about research and also thinking about how to collect some outcomes of our program. So maybe just taking a step back and talk about that. Then we'll talk about putting our plan into action. We'll also talk about some on-the-fly adaptations and also some common barriers that I've seen, not an exhaustive list, but maybe some common ones and maybe how to manage them as well. And last week we talked about the Plan, Do, Study, Act model. And just to give us a little context where we are today. So last week we kind of started with the planning stage, that first one. And then today we're moving into the do and the study stage of our model. And then our last one, we'll talk a little bit more about the act and then kind of what the next steps are and how to make a sustainment plan to continue our process. Just kind of connecting from last week to this week, how planning affects implementation. So we talked about the importance of the planning and change team, but thinking about through our strengths and weaknesses of the agencies. And we really want to highlight our strengths. So lean on our existing resources at the agency. Again, maybe we have a favorable location or knowledgeable staff. We might also have a lot of resources at our agency or helpful IT team that can help us build data collection forms. And maybe set it up so they can be autonomously kind of filling out additional forms for us. Maybe we're doing a research project and we're at an agency with an IRB or access to people that are knowledgeable in a research background. And again, we covered some of the potential things of limitations, but just being aware of them, right? So there's some things that we can't change, and being aware of what those limitations might be. I gave the example last week that I did a walkthrough, and it was a very noisy environment, very kind of overstimulating. But that's a hard thing to change, right? You can't really just knock down the building and kind of rebuild it. So, just being mindful and trying to make adaptations when we can to minimize any of those challenges that kind of we see. So I'm going to start us off today talking a little about selecting data and outcome tools. So to some degree, there's kind of an endless amount of options of how and what data to collect. And last week, I brought up the idea of trying to turn to fidelity kits or reading through our grant requirements, or maybe even state, reporting requirements that we have to do for our programs as kind of a source to first start to see what outcomes and data we want to look at. But so there's some things that we know we're going to have to collect, right? So like demographic information, things like age, ethnicity, maybe even things like medication usage. But this information is probably fairly easy to find for us, right? We might be pulling this information from intake form, or it's stored in our EHR system. But there also might be some other information that we're interested in and how to understand how effective our program is and whether or not our clients are getting the benefits that we're hoping to. And for that, we'll be looking at one of two things, or both, qualitative data or quantitative data. So quantitative data is data that can be counted. And while not a great kind of definition, but it's data that's typically like black and white. And it's asking things like how many, how often, or how much. And this is typically collected on Likert scales. We've probably answered plenty of these or seen these in person or done them ourselves. Likert scales or questions that are asking you to select one or more answers. The advantages to kind of collecting quantitative data is that it can be statistically analyzed or counted, so it's a little bit more objective data. But the disadvantages are that it's restrictive of the information that we collect, might not be as descriptive. So it's important that we ask very clear questions. So I just want to now bring up a quick resource. I talked about it last week, a website to kind of find some surveys and questionnaires that might be helpful or for us to use. So I'm just going to stop sharing and then bring up the web page for us. I will put the website also in the chat. Okay, so on this website, I kind of stumbled across it looking for a full version of a survey, but I was very impressed by it. It's been very helpful. So on this website, you can kind of search for different survey tools and things like that. So I'm just going to kind of give you a quick example. So if you go right into the search box, you put in a topic that you're interested in. So research topic I'm interested in is physical activity. And we just click the little search bar. And then it brings up a list of different tools. I'm going to see if I could find one that I'm familiar with. So I see the IPAC questionnaire. So you can click on the questionnaire if you're interested in it, and it gives you a little bit of information about the tool, as well as, not for all of them, but some of them, they give you the tool itself. Right, so this tool they give you right here for the IPAC, and then you can also download the tool as well. We just click this download. You can download a couple different versions of it. But what I like about it is it gives you some administrative information, right? How to administer the questionnaire, gives you some details about it. It also gives you some source, so you can kind of check how if it's been used in research previously, and maybe what populations it's been used with, and kind of get a sense of the reliability and validity of the tool. So I think it's a great resource, this website. Again, if you're interested in a certain topic or collecting information about a certain thing, whether it's a symptom measure or anything else, and you can kind of search through and go through some of the different questionnaires and kind of get a sense of, hey, there's all these different tools, and you kind of pick and choose which ones might work best for your project or your agency. Okay, so now I'm just going to bring back up my slides here. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next thing here, the qualitative data. So typically this is data that is non-numerical or gray data. So this data can be collected in different ways. So we might use some open-ended questions, interview styles, so either collected individually or in a group. It can also be collected through observation, so just kind of making observations. The advantages of this kind of data is that it's often very rich data and provides an in-depth analysis of kind of what we're asking and looking for. And it can really give us reasoning for why people are making the answers they're providing us. However, some of the disadvantages for collecting qualitative data is that it's time-consuming to collect and also analyze. It's harder to make generalizations on the finding. So typically, you have smaller sample sizes, and it can be dependent on the researcher. So the findings are a little bit more subjective and reliant on the qualitative analysis skills of the person who's looking at the data. Qualitative data can be very helpful. We can collect things like opinions on services that people are receiving. As part of our MHTTC, when we have those follow-up surveys, we ask what you like about the survey, the trainings, what you didn't like about the trainings. We also ask, what are some future topics you're interested in? So it really gives us, a lot of information just by collecting those open-ended questions. And I'll just make the case for using a mixed methods or trying to collect two different types, both the quantitative and qualitative data. So we see the quantitative data, right? We might ask, what's your favorite color, right? But that only gives us part of the answer. And if we ask the qualitative version of it, why is blue your favorite color, or why is whatever favorite color, we really get an in-depth answer on kind of why they were selected that first part. And the last thing I want to talk about with the data that we're collecting is just the research design. And there's lots of different ways that you can go about this. But these are kind of the three simplest designs, or three most common designs. So in these little diagrams, the O is an observation or a point that we collect our information or our data, or we might do a baseline measure and then a follow-up measure. And then the X might be an intervention, so for providing a particular service. So if you want to collect and see if our service is making much of a difference, you might collect data at our baseline, have the intervention, and then a follow-up one, so pre-post design. We may also include a control group, so we might have one group that doesn't receive the intervention. So we have a pre and a post, one group receives the intervention and one doesn't. And then the other common one is kind of a waitlist control, so that control group, while they didn't receive the intervention the first time, they're kind of getting it the second time. So this is typically done when it's unethical to kind of not provide that intervention. So everyone still gets it, but it still gives us kind of a point where we can make some observations and draw some conclusions on how effective our program is. Okay, so I know we threw a lot of information on kind of this research aspect and research design. So I'm wondering if anyone has any questions or thoughts, or if they think one way may be better than the other to collect data. And also just checking in to see if everyone's kind of still with me here. So again, smiley faces, thumbs up are helpful. Thank you. I appreciate some thumbs up in there. It's helpful for me to know how everyone's doing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about putting our plan into action. So the first thing we need to do is kind of make everyone aware of what the new program is and what the changes may be if it's an existing program already. And what we want to do, kind of the idea is to disseminate information about the program, right? So maybe we had a smaller team with that change team, and now we have to try to give out that information to the rest of the larger team or the larger agency. And when I say larger agency, I don't just mean giving information to clinicians, but also providing information to people that may work at the front desk, or drivers of the agency, or even other staff members who aren't directly involved with that new program. But I think it's a good practice to do that, so kind of everyone knows, hey, this is the new program, this is kind of what we're trying to do. If they get a client that comes and asks them about the new program, at least they can give them a little overview, and if anything, at least know who to refer that person to get some information. And some things you want to kind of give out when we talk to these staff, and the information we want to provide is the goals of our new project and some of the objectives. Talking about new processes, maybe there's a new way we're delivering services, kind of, so getting everyone on the same page as far as this is how we're going to do things. This is what kind of we're trying to do. We might be introducing and sharing new forms, right? So we might have new ways to document our services. Maybe there's a new way to enter the data, or a new process on how to get the data into our EHR. So, kind of giving everyone the information on how to manage that and the data that we collect. And, if it's a research projects are often done on paper surveys, which is good and bad in its own way. But giving someone some idea of, hey, when you have a completed paper survey, give it to so-and-so, they'll take care of it. Giving the person some background on how to use the questionnaires if they're helping provide the surveys. And also, if you're a researcher and you're trying to partner with a program, this is a great way, giving people some information on your project is a great way to kind of partner with those agencies, have them kind of determine if the project's a fit for them and if they're interested in, helping you out. And also giving this information out offers a time for staff to ask questions, right? So you're giving them the information and they're now able to, raise concerns or ask questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about some of the common barriers and maybe some ways around it. But I think it's important to kind of offer that opportunity for people to ask questions. you don't want people to hear through the grapevine, there's a new program going on, and then people are, they don't have an outlet for, questions or concerns about it. And, that can just kind of turn people off, right? It's going to be hard to engage them and to buy into the program if they're already like, they're not including us. They're just, telling us what to do, right? So again, importance of good communication between everyone. And the next thing I want to talk about is setting ourselves up for successes and also setting ourselves up to expect for failures. Issues coming up are inevitable. I mean, there's, that's kind of the idea for this training, right? To help minimize some of the common issues that I've seen working with projects. Just offer some ideas to prevent some of those things coming up and some ideas overcoming them. But inevitably, there's going to be challenges that are hard to be able to foresee them, or things just happen, right? Things come up. So I think, again, I have kind of a recurring theme of having good communication, but good communication all around, right? From the top down, but also from the bottom up, right? So giving options for frontline staff to kind of provide feedback to, people that are trying to organize the program. And we want to provide support for counselors, right? So that might include offering additional supervision, right? So maybe we have completely new staff that are not only learning about the program that we're trying to implement, but also learning about the agency, right? They're trying to just learn everyday things, and maybe they're managing EHR systems. Those are always a challenge to learn. So there might be a steep learning curve for them. So providing additional supervision for them can be helpful. Maybe we have existing staff that are in new settings, so they might be unsure of their abilities or their new responsibilities. So again, just having supervision just kind of offers a space for questions, concerns. It offers kind of a safe place for us to offer guidance and help people kind of, how to deliver the new services, how to collect that data and document the data that we're collecting. And then kind of going along with providing additional supervision, we want to provide ongoing trainings, right? So providing kind of an original training or one training might be helpful, but continually reinforcing kind of what's going on, or what the plan might be, or the new processes, can prevent old habits and also offer a refresher of all that information. And plus, I don't know about anyone else, when I hear things the first time, I don't always collect it all. So sometimes having a refresher kind of helps nail down and reinforce some of the things that I'm, hearing about or learning about. Also offering smaller meetings with the change team, right? So having the change team discuss how things are going in a smaller group. So what's going good, what's not going good. Maybe in these meetings, we want to examine some preliminary data. And I know that people are always kind of nervous about that, but I think I lean on the side that it's perfectly fine to look at some of that preliminary data, and try to understand, hey, are the services that we're delivering, are they being delivered as intended? Are we getting some of the outcomes we're hoping for? And, the data that we are hoping to collect, does it represent what we're interested in? It's kind of a good way to kind of assess, hey, is the survey that we provided or we selected to use, is it actually collecting the information we're interested in? And, as we're looking at data, we might look at some official data, right? So that surveys or outcomes or forms that our clients are filling out, but it can also be unofficial data, right? So what are staff complaining about? I worked at a program, they were delivering a survey that was super long, and all the staff are complaining. They're like, listen, we can't do anything. This survey takes a half hour. We have an hour session, right? So we kind of had to go back and rethink about what tools we were using. Also, our original work plan might be overly structured or might be not structured enough. So kind of tweaking things as they come up. And the next thing I want to talk about was some on-the-fly changes, right? So sometimes things are just not working out. We're not getting the outcomes that we kind of hope for. We're not seeing the program be as successful as we hope for. We're observing barriers of delivering the service. We're seeing kind of all these issues. I kind of like to liken this to a sports team, right? Sometimes you have a game plan. You go into the game and you have this, this game plan. You think you kind of thought everything through and, have an idea of how to be successful, but it ends up that it's not working, right? So what would those teams do? Right? They're going to call a timeout, try to shift their plan around, rethink things, and try something totally different. And I think that sometimes that we have to do that when we're, implementing a new project or new program. We need to consider, does the program just need more time to kind of take off? Are we just getting started? Is it a little too early to kind of see returns for us? So it takes time to enroll clients in a program. It takes time for staff to be trained. It takes time for data to be collected. And sometimes there's different goals, right? Sometimes we might have those short-term goals, right? Things might be, are we fully staffed? Are we enrolling clients, right? Those are short-term goals that we kind of hope to see kind of somewhat immediately. But there's also those long-term goals, clients improving after receiving our services. Like those kind of goals we're not gonna see for kind of way down the line. So it's not realistic to expect to see those right away. And also thinking about, kind of what we talked about last week. What are some of the barriers that we're facing? We talked about all these different kind of areas to think about, but what exactly in those areas might be hindering our program? So again, we talked about things like location, right? Do we have a favorable location for a program? Staffing, are we staffed? Are we having issues getting people to kind of stick around and work at our program? Or maybe they're kind of not, fully trained up, right? So those might be barriers that we see. Thinking about funding, right? Funding is always a challenge. Do we have enough funding to actually deliver, the service that we're hoping to deliver? And again, things like needs of service and some of the other barriers that we talked about. So what can we do to address some of these barriers, and what are some ways that we can kind of tackle them, right? So we need to discuss in that smaller group, maybe instead of including everyone, have that smaller group to kind of think about and talk about some of those issues. And there's not always a single answer, right? So every program kind of has unique challenges and unique barriers that they're facing. And every program might have multiple issues, so not every issue requires the same solution. So kind of thinking about and taking each issue and kind of looking at hey, what's the problem and how might we tackle that and get around it. And I'll tell you that implementing a new program or research project, it is a totally and absolutely humbling experience. Sometimes the research team or the project team kind of just needs to. I'm seeing, are the slides supposed to be advancing?
Oh yeah, we were stuck on the tennis court that whole time.
I apologize. Yes,
No
I'm still on the
problem.
tennis court. I think I overloaded this slide.
Oh, okay. I'm
Too much
sorry. It
information on
sounded
my
like you
end,
were
but
talking about the next topic, so I thought maybe I wasn't looking
Yeah,
at the
well,
right thing.
I appreciate that. Sometimes that happens, right? It just the slides aren't moving, and I get it, but I appreciate you bringing that up. But yeah, implementing a new program is sometimes a totally humbling experience. Sometimes your original plan is just not kind of well designed, or wasn't designed as well as you originally thought. I still have some trauma from doing my dissertation study. I thought it was going to be, I had all these great ideas and how I was going to recruit participants, and then right in the middle of COVID, and censuses were down at all these programs, and I had to totally rethink the strategy, right? So that was a total barrier, right? That I had to, think about, and, what am I going to do to try to get to my recruitment numbers? So sometimes there's an overlooked barrier, or maybe there's a new barrier, right? And we just have to kind of adapt. And, I think COVID's kind of a great example of that, right? We kind of had to totally change our delivery services, and kind of how we approach that. And just think about in, your own agency or wherever you were at that time, the huge team effort that it really took to transition to make that new service delivery method, right? We had to manage virtual hybrid services, incorporate all the social distancing. The needs of all of our clients changed, right? So they needed totally different things, and we, totally had to rethink and reshuffle around what we were doing. And then the last part here about making some changes on the fly. Does our process kind of need to be examined and tweaked, kind of going along with those? I worked at one agency where staff were not really sure what they needed to do. And not only that, they weren't really aware of how important it was to document kind of some of the outcomes and, making sure their client notes were very clear. So what we had to do is we had to go through and make a whole flow chart of all the staff, identify all the responsibilities of everybody, and kind of identify where things kind of needed to be ironed out. And one thing that really came up was the issues with their forms and questionnaires. They were like, I think I brought this up before, but they're delivering a symptoms measure. They were doing it. It was a very long process. They were doing it almost every time the clients, came to see them. So it was very overburdensome for the staff. So we switched to a new measure. We started seeing some better outcomes and data related to that. Okay, so I know I did a lot of talking and threw kind of a lot of information out there. Just want to kind of check in and see how people feel about putting their new plan into action, setting their program up for success, or trying to make changes on the fly. Do people feel confident in that? What kind of concerns do people have being in that situation? Okay, I see in the chat, the trick is knowing how long to wait before making the changes to the plan. Yeah, that's a tough one to kind of to feel out. I think having those continual discussions with everyone, whether that's with staff members or with, agency leadership, or also with clients, having those ongoing conversations, I think, you can get a sense of what maybe the minor issues are, right? Things that maybe, hey, let's wait these kind of things out and see, we'll talk about it more, and we have, we'll have our team meetings and those things. But I think it's the major ones, right? So the larger the problem, I think the more important it is to stay on top of it and consider, hey, do we need to make changes? This is kind of a big thing, or a real thing that's hindering our program. I think maybe considering the importance of potential issue is key to know how long to wait. See, no questions from someone else. So again, just wondering how people are doing. So people are feeling good about the speed or the information. All clear for now. Smiley faces and thumbs up are helpful too. Okay, great. Looks good. Thank you. Very helpful for me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the common barriers that I have experienced or seen. And this, again, this probably is an exhaustive list. There can be a far and wide variety of barriers that we might see with our program. But I think a lot of things can be grouped into these 4 areas or kind of related to these 4 areas. So the first one is lack of clarity. Another one is lack of resources. Another one, a big one, is resistance to change. That might be staff or clients, or a lot of agencies as a whole, right? Have culture going on, so there's a resistance to changing that culture. And then the other last big one I've seen is a lack of follow through or commitment to the project. So the first one I wanted to talk about was this lack of clarity. So the lack of clarity can be related to kind of a few different things. The first kind of thing might be program goals. Or so when we think about, the kind of thing that I like to think about is when we're writing a goal plan for a client. We've all seen good and bad goal plans. And the good goal plans have a very concrete objective. They have a clear timeline of, when each of those little parts of the goal plan are going to be accomplished. And, this can kind of be tied back to having, goal plan for a project, right? What are the things we want to accomplish? What are the timelines that we are hoping to see some of those things? What's the timeline for us to implement different aspects of the project? Yeah, so having a clear goal for our program. The other thing kind of related to that is there might be too many goals to tackle. So I think that there's something to be said about being great at a few things and not being average at kind of a lot of things. Keeping our focus narrow and keeping it on what's important. I worked, there's this SAMHSA grant that I work with. They have a few different ones, and I've worked with a couple different versions at different agencies. But a requirement from the grant is that they have to collect data on a ton of different areas, and there's just a ton of different areas that they're expected to focus on and work on. And I think it's very hard for those programs to be successful. There's just almost too much stuff that they need to focus on, and I think that's a fault of the grant and the expectation for that. But I think the idea is important to consider, right? Trying to think about what we can really be good at, and not try to kind of overpromise or try to be great at everything, because it's it's difficult to do that. I think there can also be a lack of clarity for roles and responsibilities of everybody. So counselors and staff aren't sure what they should be doing. And I think that this could be different reasons, but one thing I know that I've worked at places where there's, staff are being told multiple things from multiple people, right? So there's different people that are kind of calling the shots, right? And if you're a staff person, no matter what you do, you're going to get in trouble. Either you do it the way person A wants it, and then person B is going to yell at you, or you do it the way person B wants it, and then person A is going to kind of yell at you. And the result of that is that services and your objectives aren't really being carried out, and you're not really seeing them. So I think that this kind of goes back, this lack of clarity goes back to making sure you have ample time for the planning stage, right? Making sure that people on that smaller group are kind of on the same page and have a unified voice. And again, that recurring theme of having, good communication, not only from the top down, but also from the down up, and listening to those people that are delivering services. They're on the front line, and they're seeing, what's working, what's not working, probably before anyone else. So kind of making sure we listen to them. So I think the next biggest barrier is a lack of resources. And again, this can be different things. This can be staff, physical resources, or financial resources. So the first thing I wanted to think about was the lack of staff as a resource. Staff is probably, without staff, you can't deliver services. So, how many times have you seen that staff are just totally overburdened, right? Or they just don't have enough energy to kind of see all the clients or deliver the kind of services they need to. And in a grant funded thing or in a new program, you want to be able to deliver those services well. So having appropriate caseloads. And I know that's way easier said than done, especially in the current climate of trying to hire, counselors and getting and keeping those good staff members. But, trying to be realistic with caseloads and being realistic with staff abilities, with what they're trained in and what they're knowledgeable about. I saw someone unmute their mic. I don't know if someone had a question or a thought. Okay. So the other lack of resource might be physical resource, right? So limited on space. So again, thinking about the location we select for a program. And I worked in a partial care program, and space was just, very limited. It was almost impossible to have, a quiet space. So it was very difficult to deliver kind of one-on-one sessions. So if that's an important aspect to your program or one that you're, considering to be an important aspect, trying to think about how can you incorporate, space for someone to do a one-on-one session in, a very loud or busy atmosphere. And then I think also lack of financial resources is something to consider, right? What can the program really do with the funding that's available? I've worked on projects or seen writing grants or seen grant applications. They have these very big, lofty goals, and they kind of overpromise in their grant proposal, which I think is common, right? You want to make a nice grant proposal that sounds great. You're going to do all these things, but then the problem with that is that you get the grant, and if you can't deliver on all the objectives, it's not helpful for your staff. Right now, they're going to be stretched too thin trying to do too many things. It's not good for the agency, right? If you're not showing that you're able to handle, a grant, it's unlikely or challenging to get refunded. And at the end of the day, we're really just here to deliver good services to clients and help our clients. And, if we're trying to do too many things and, again, trying to be average at a ton of things and not great at any one particular thing, it's really a disservice for our clients. And, we want to deliver good services and ultimately have great outcomes for our clients. So, being realistic in what as an agency or what as a team we can deliver. Okay, I think one of the biggest challenges that we see, one of the biggest barriers is resistance to change. And I think that it really stems from the fact that change can be scary, right? If you've been in an agency for a while, you're somewhat comfortable in your routine. This is kind of how I like to do things. You're comfortable with their schedule. I show up, I have a few minutes to check my email in the morning. I like the clients I work with. I like the people that my coworkers, if you're shifting around now, no longer I'm working with, so-and-so who's my work buddy, and, we go to lunch at the same time. So there's really like a fear of the unknown, right? What's this new program going to look like? What does it mean for me? What's my job security now, right? There's all those thoughts that go through your head whenever you have a change, whether you're in a new position or being shifted, your responsibilities around. So, right, change is scary, and there's resistance because of that. And shifting these things around, there could be a change in power dynamics, right? So some staff, especially like senior staff, they have some power and responsibilities, and have some seniority over everybody and kind of what they get to pick and do. And, a change might, be seen as a threat to their job security and kind of a threat to their importance at the agency. Clients might I'm sorry, not clients, staff might also be already overworked, and, they've seen new programs come and go, and new initiatives being implemented. And, when you're in that and, you've seen programs be started and, not really go anywhere, that thought goes through your mind like, here's another program or another project that they're trying to implement. And, in 3 weeks, it'll totally blow over and we can go right back to our regular ways. So, staff might be burnt out, not only because they're have higher caseloads and it's hard to bring on a new project or take on new responsibilities, but also just burnt out from, new projects being implemented, which I think go into the last barrier I'll talk about, which is the commitment to the project. But there might also be resistance for change from clients, right? They might also already like the services that they're receiving, and they might have some fear of the unknown, right? Am I still going to get the services that I typically receive, or the services that I need? So again, I go back to the good communication thing as a solution, but having conversations with clients, having conversations with staff, and trying to understand, where's the resistance coming from? What is it that you're concerned about? What can we do to ease that burden? And kind of level with them, right? There's no reason to not be transparent. This is what we're trying to do. This is why we're doing things why we have it planned this way. And try to, be totally transparent. And you want to focus on the benefits for all people for everyone that's involved, right? Focusing on how this new program might help them in different ways, right? So it might make delivering services better or easier. Clients might have better outcomes, so it'll be a little bit more rewarding. Maybe they're getting some training and learning a new marketable skill. And then, of course, compensation, right? Maybe they'll receive increased compensation or receive some kind of benefit for the new position they're in. Okay, and then the last barrier that I think I see pretty commonly is a lack of follow-through or commitment to the project. So again, that kind of goes back to what I was just saying, how staff can be fatigued from new initiatives and seeing new programs kind of come and go. And that kind of might be a fault of the commitment from administrators or the agency as a whole, not following through and not reinforcing the importance of the program, or having those administrators or the agency as a whole kind of buying into the program and enforcing the new project. I'm sure everyone's worked at a job where, as soon as there's some leaks in the boat, it's kind of felt, and you get those resistant people, see, this is just another project, it's not going good, so-and-so is not kind of, this is just another project, it'll be gone in a few weeks. So making sure that we have a continual reinforcement from the change team is being open to feedback and willing to make necessary changes for success. Listening to the clients and staff and, incorporating all that back into it and, trying their best to stay true to what the goals and outcomes were of their project. Okay, so I see that we are nearing the end of our time. So I wanted to stop here and let anyone have any questions or thoughts, or was there anything that I didn't cover that anyone was hoping to get information of around some of these ideas, or ideas for next week? We have one more session, so is there anything that people would like me to make sure I cover in our last session? see some thumbs up and some people who said it was good. I appreciate the feedback. Of course, you're all welcome. So unfortunately, this session was a little bit more, I don't think as concrete as the first session, where I had a lot more resources for you all. And the last session, I think I'm anticipating to have some more resources. So unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of tools to share with you guys today. I'll just say, I think 2 things that I think are helpful going through. If you're coming up with some barriers and maybe you're not really sure what to do or how to approach them or try to figure out what's going on. I think doing walkthroughs again, redoing your walkthroughs are helpful. Doing that initial walkthrough, you can kind of get a sense of what's going on and, some barriers. But then if you implement that new project and kind of redo your walkthroughs, not only will you see some things that are going great, right? And you can compliment your staff and, hey, this is a change from when we went on, you're doing great here. You get an idea of kind of where maybe things are still getting hung up or snagged on. And then the other thing might be to do kind of a flow chart idea and kind of writing down, hey, which the flow chart is kind of a talk through instead of a walkthrough, right? You're listing what everyone's doing, what does it look through for the whole process of the program. It's just a kind of another way to kind of see where things are getting hung up and identify different areas. Maybe you can iron out some of those things. So again, I'm sorry I don't have a lot of resources for those. If I come across anything, I'll make sure I send them along. So that's what I have today. Again, if anyone has any questions or thoughts, if not, I'll turn it over to Kati to go through our last couple slides.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate the wealth of information shared, and to everyone who participated today, thank you so much, and for also staying with us. Next slide, please.
Oh, yeah.
As mentioned before, our center is funded through SAMHSA, and in order to receive this funding, we are required to submit data related to the quality of this training event. So if you could please take a moment to complete our brief survey by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen. I will also share the link in the chat box if it's easier for you to access it. And I will put it in right now. Slide, please. We also invite you to listen to our podcast channel, Towards Wellness and Recovery, and we'd like to feature Flourishing at Work, a plan for helping professionals. And you may find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or Podbean. Next slide, please. And if you missed any of our previous webinars, you may access an entire library and catalog of our previously recorded webinars along with the presentation slide, and you may do so by hovering over the QR code that you see on your screen, and it'll take you directly to our products and resources catalog on our website. Next slide, please. As a reminder, a certificate of completion will be emailed to all participants within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. If you have not received yours, we ask that you please check your email spam folders in case you missed our last one. Next slide, please. And again, if you'd like to connect with us, I will put my email in the chat so that way, if you have any questions or follow-up questions to this presentation, you can access me through my email. Also, I will be sharing a link to the registration for next week's final session in this series, just to ensure that you are registered. And I will put that registration link in the chat as well right now. And again, I just want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you to our webinar presenter, Sean, for providing us with the wealth of information regarding implementation of programs and evaluation. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. Appreciate all the participation and hope to see you next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Kathy.